You are watching the Neuro-Affirming Conversation Hour for outreach and support. The Humanities 101 Foundation welcomes you.
Hello, Nacho Knots, Humanities students, and everyone else. Welcome back to the Neuro-Affirming Conversation Hour for outreach and support, or as we lovingly call it around here, Nachos. This is the video podcast component of my Humanities 101 class that runs in the fall, in the winter, and in the summer. So whether you're joining us during a full semester, a mini semester, a season in transition, or simply a season of survival, I'm really glad that you're here. There's something strange about the beginning of a class or the beginning of a season. The fresh tabs, the blank documents, the unopened books, the promises that we quietly make to ourselves. This time I'll stay organized. This time I'll stay ahead. This time I'll finally feel like I belong here. And yet, for so many people, especially neurodivergent folks, school is often felt like a place of curiosity, less like a place of curiosity, and more like a place of performance and compliance. A place where learning slowly becomes confused with that compliance, where grades replace wonder, where burnout disguises itself as achievement, and where people begin to ask not what fascinates you, but rather how productive can you be under pressure? And that's always been funny to me. And it brings me to today's quote from Albert Einstein. Einstein said, quote, "Education is what remains after one has forgotten everything he learned in school. It is a miracle that curiosity survives formal education." Now listen to that last part again. It's a miracle that curiosity survives formal education. I've always found that quote both beautiful and heartbreaking, because if we're honest, many people do not leave school remembering formulas or vocabulary words or dates from a lecture slide, but they do remember how school made them feel. They remember whether they felt stupid or capable, welcomed or tolerated, inspired or exhausted, safe enough to ask questions or afraid to be wrong. And I think Einstein really was wrestling with something deeply human here. Real education is not the memorization of disconnected facts. Real education is what changes the lens through which you see yourself and you see the world around you. It's the thing that lingers after the test is over. It's the curiosity that survives. It's the perspective that shifts, the empathy that deepens, the question that keeps rattling around in your head long after class ends. That's education. It's not a worksheet. It's definitely not a Scantron. It surely is not your GPA. And honestly, I think one of the greatest tragedies in modern education is how often curiosity gets treated like a disruption instead of a gift. Especially for students who ask too many questions, who wander intellectually, students who hyperfocus, students who think sideways instead of straight ahead, students who need context before compliance, students who are made to feel too much in systems that only reward a very narrow definition of success. But curiosity is not dysfunction. Curiosity is humanity reaching outward. It's the mind saying, there is more. I want to understand. I want to connect. I want to make meaning. And maybe this mini semester, this summer season, maybe in this moment, it's not about proving your worth through exhaustion. Maybe it's about rediscovering curiosity again. Not performance, not perfection, curiosity. So today, Nacho Knots, we're talking about what happens when learning becomes human again. When belonging matters, when accessibility matters, when people are allowed to ask questions instead of simply memorize answers. And when education stops being about surviving systems and starts becoming about understanding ourselves and each other, well, that's the real goal here, isn't it? So let's talk about what people can expect from this class and from this semester moving forward. First and foremost, my Humanities 101 class is not designed to be a class where you simply memorize information and repeat it back to me. This class will feel different from many courses you may have taken before because Humanities is ultimately about learning about yourself and your relationship to the world around you. This course is about reflection, perspective, culture, systems, identity, community, and the human experience. It asks larger questions than many classes do. Questions like, why do societies work the way they do? Who gets included? Who gets left out? What shapes our understanding of human value? What even is human? How do cultures, disabilities, different forms of media, education, technology, politics, and identity intersect with everyday life? And perhaps most importantly, what does it actually mean to be human in a rapidly changing world? Throughout this semester, we're going to explore those ideas together through documentaries, readings, discussion, reflection, media, storytelling, and your own lived experience. You're not expected to already know the answers. In many ways, this course will provide more questions than answers. It's less about memorizing information and more about learning how to think critically, ask questions meaningfully, and recognize systems around you so that you can better understand yourself and those other people. Structurally, this semester is intentionally simple. You complete 2 major projects. A midterm that centers around the documentary Crip Camp, where you'll reflect on themes of disability, inclusion, identity, activism, belonging, and human dignity through a written assessment, a test, if you will. Open book, open notes. Your final project will focus on our course text, which is academic ableism. And you're going to create a filmed oral presentation examining accessibility, inclusion, and micro-accommodations in everyday life. Basically, you'll be asked to think about how systems can become more human-centered, more flexible, and more inclusive for real people. Both the documentary and the course text are available for free because I believe education and meaningful conversation should be accessible as possible. You'll also notice that this YouTube channel is a central part of the course experience. This is not simply a place where you passively watch lectures. This is where you'll interact with me, with each other, and with larger conversations happening in the world around us. Your participation in this class happens through engagement with the channel, the videos, and the discussions connected to them. The comments section becomes part classroom, part conversation, part reflection space, and part community. In many ways, this course is designed around dialogue rather than isolation. And honestly, I hope this class becomes more than simply another requirement to complete. I hope it becomes a space where you notice things differently, where you question assumptions differently, where you think more deeply about people, systems, inclusion, culture, and even yourself, where curiosity is encouraged rather than punished. Because real education is not simply the accumulation of information, dates, and facts. It's the process of becoming more thoughtful, more reflective, more compassionate, and more aware of the world around you. And really, your place within that world. So whether you're excited, nervous, overwhelmed, burned out, returning to school after years away, or simply trying to make it through one day at a time, welcome. You belong here. You belong in this class, in this space, in this moment. And I am genuinely excited to learn with you this semester. Another thing you'll probably notice very quickly about this class is that much of our learning will be built around curiosity and genuine engagement rather than simply checking boxes. I am far less interested in whether you can mechanically complete tasks than whether you're thinking. I really want you thinking, reflecting, questioning, connecting ideas, and growing as a human being in whatever that means to you. In many traditional educational environments, students are often taught to focus almost entirely on compliance. Did you submit the assignment? Did you hit the word count? Did you complete the discussion board? Did you check off every required task? And I know that sometimes is simple, easy, safe. But genuine learning is much, much, much messier, much more human, and much more meaningful than that. Real learning happens when something sparks your curiosity, when an idea unsettles you, when a documentary changes how you see people, when a reading forces you to rethink assumptions, when a conversation lingers in your head long after class is over. That's the kind of learning I care about. That's the kind of learning I love. And that's why we'll spend time throughout this semester discussing ideas connected to Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, which you'll encounter in the course readings and in the course. UDL is built around the understanding that human beings learn differently, think differently, process differently, communicate differently, and ultimately engage differently. Instead of forcing every student in one rigid path, Universal Design for Learning asks, how do we create environments where more people can genuinely participate, engage, and ultimately succeed? That philosophy deeply shapes how I approach this course and my teaching. I don't believe meaningful education should simply be about endurance, memorization, or jumping through hoops. I believe education should create opportunities for curiosity, reflection, dialogue, accessibility, flexibility, and authentic engagement with ideas. That also means that this class asks something important from you. It asks you to be present, to be thoughtful, to be curious, to engage honestly with the material and with yourself. And you don't have to be perfect here. You don't always have to have the right answer. Hell, you don't even have to have an answer. But I do hope that you're willing to think deeply, ask questions, challenge assumptions, and remain open to learning. Because at the end of the day, humanities is not simply about studying the world. It's about understanding what it means to live in it. And I also want you to understand something important from the very beginning of this class. Your ideas, your observations, your research, and your reflections can have real meaning beyond simply earning a grade. Some of the work created in previous Humanities 101 classes has actually led to real-world micro-accommodations being implemented in workplaces, classrooms, community spaces, and homes. Students have taken ideas they explored in this course and applied them in ways that made environments more accessible, more compassionate, more flexible, and more human-centered for other people. Sometimes those changes were very small. A modified communication style, a sensory-friendly environment, a more flexible workplace practice, a change in how meanings are structured, a new way of thinking about inclusion in a classroom or a family environment. But small changes have enormous human impact. And honestly, that is one of the central ideas behind micro-accommodations and universal design in the first place. Human-centered systems are often built through thoughtful, small actions repeated consistently over time, not through big, grandiose, sweeping changes. And I think many students are used to assignments that feel disposable. You complete a paper, you submit a discussion board, you pass a test, and then everything disappears into the void of the semester. But I don't see education that way. I believe learning should matter. I believe ideas should travel beyond the classroom. I believe reflection should influence how we treat other human beings. And ultimately, I believe education should help people become more aware not only of themselves, but of their ability to positively affect the world around them. Because truly, what is the purpose of education if not to uplift both the individual and the people around that individual? Not simply to produce workers, not simply to generate grades, not simply to survive institutions, but to help human beings grow in wisdom, empathy, curiosity, courage, and compassion. And that means the work you do here has the potential to matter far beyond this class. It may shape how you lead, how you teach, how you parent, how you advocate, communicate, design environments, even how you understand difference. But ultimately, how you make space for other people to fully belong. That's real learning. And that's the kind of work we're trying to do together here. So that naturally brings us to something else that is deeply important in this class: research. Now, when people hear that word, research, they immediately imagine giant textbooks, confusing academic jargon, endless citations, or papers written in language that barely sounds human anymore. But here in Humanities 101 class at NACHOS, we approach research differently. Research is not simply about collecting information. It's about learning how to better understand ourselves, each other, and the systems we live within. It's about finding ideas that help explain real human experience. It's about discovering concepts that make people feel seen. It's about recognizing patterns in the world around us and asking, how could things be better? How could systems become more human-centered? How could people feel more included, more supported, and more understood? This is what we do here. We connect research to real life. We take ideas from psychology, disability studies, sociology, history, media studies, pop culture, education, philosophy, and cultural analysis and ask, what is actually useful here? What helps human beings thrive? What increases understanding, compassion, accessibility, and dignity? What helps people build healthier lives and healthier communities? And honestly, sometimes part of education is learning to, as I always say, take what you need and leave the rest. Not every theory will resonate with you. Not every framework will fit your lived experience. Not every academic idea deserves unquestioned acceptance. Part of genuine learning is developing the wisdom to critically engage with information rather than simply absorbing it passively. To ask, does this help people? Does this increase understanding? Does this create more humanity or less? Does this reflect real lived experiences? Because knowledge without humanity can become cold very, very quickly. But research connected to empathy, reflection, and lived experience, it becomes transformative. And some of the most exciting work happening today in areas like universal design, neurodiversity, disability studies, trauma-informed education, human-centered design is simply about asking the fundamental, hopeful question. What if human difference is not a problem to eliminate, but a reality to design for? Think about that. What if human difference, variation, was not a problem to eliminate, but a reality to design for? That question has the power to reshape classrooms, to reshape workplaces, to reshape communities, families, technology, leadership, and perhaps even how people understand themselves. And to me, that's why this work matters. That's why it matters. And that brings me to some research that honestly may be one of the most important things I've worked on in recent years, especially with students, because it reveals something deeply about about education, disability, neurodiversity, and how even our institution actually functions. I worked with an honor student last semester, and we conducted a study looking at how our college faculty responded to neurodivergent student behaviors in classroom settings. Faculty members were given realistic classroom scenarios involving students struggling with participation, communication, emotional regulation, missed deadlines, or classroom interactions. Some faculty were told the students were autistic or neurodivergent. Others were given the exact same behavior with no disclosure. And the results were fascinating because the story the data tells is not the story that most people expect. The overwhelming majority of faculty actually cared. Roughly 85 to 95% of faculty responding expressed empathy towards all students. Around 80 to 90% rejected punitive responses like removing the student from the class, involving security, or treating the student as if they did not belong. Let's see here. There we go. And to me, you look at this chart over here, that matters. Because for years, many conversations around autism, disability, and higher education have operated from the assumption that the primary problem is cruelty, hostility, or lack of compassion. But this research revealed something different, something more nuanced, and honestly, much more hopeful. The problem was not primarily empathy. The problem was translation. And one of the reasons this research became so powerful is because once we visualize the data, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. There's one graph in particular that honestly hit me more emotionally when we put it together. The graph compares faculty responses when autism was disclosed versus undisclosed. And visually, the graph almost tells a story all by itself. On one side, empathy levels already fairly high, around the 85-90%. But once autism is disclosed, empathy jumps to almost universal levels, nearly 95 to 100%. At the exact same time, punitive responses collapse downward to below 10%. And when you first look at the image, it actually feels hopeful. You think, wow, people really do become more understanding when they have context. But then your eyes move to the next section of the graph. And that's where the entire study reveals itself. Because recommendations for counseling and outside services skyrocket upward to around 80 to 90%. So while support for classroom accommodations barely, in this instance, moves at all. And visually, that is the moment the whole thing clicks. Empathy rises, punishment falls, but the classroom itself barely changes. Honestly, when you see the graph, it almost feels like watching institutions hit an invisible wall. The image tells the story. We care about you, but we still don't know how to redesign the environment around you. And that became the central finding of this study. What we, this student and I, called the clinical support gap. The gap between I recognize this student is struggling and I know how to adjust the environment in front of me. And honestly, Nacho Knots, I think this may explain modern institutions better than almost anything I've seen in years. Because how often do systems recognize suffering but fail to adapt? How often do schools, workplaces, governments, and organizations say, we support people, we care about mental health, we value inclusion, we believe in accessibility, but then leave the actual environment unchanged? That's the gap. And then there's another graphic in the study that may even be more revealing. It's a chart showing 4 categories of faculty responses: supportive, clinical, neutral, and punitive. And what jumps out immediately is that the largest category by far was not punitive. It was clinical. Nearly half of all faculty responses fell into the refer students elsewhere category. Not how can I adapt my classroom? How can I become a better teacher? But who else can handle this? Whose job is this? Not mine. And honestly, that image may explain the experience of many neurodivergent people and students better than words ever could. People often care emotionally while systems remain structurally unchanged. That distinction matters because this research is not saying faculty are bad people. In fact, one of the most hopeful findings in the entire study is that many faculty were not resistant to accommodations at all. They were just uncertain. Another chart in the study shows what we started calling the neutral zone. Around 1/3 of faculty landed directly in the middle of the accommodation question. Let's see here. Boom. Let's see, figure 2. Yeah. So these faculty were not hostile, not punitive, not dismissive, just uncertain. And one faculty member wrote something that honestly may summarize the entire study in one sentence. And this is the quote, I want to help, but I'm not sure what I can do in this situation. I want to help, but I'm not sure what I can do in this situation. And honestly, I think that sentence explains an enormous amount about our society right now. A lot of people want to help. A lot of people care. They feel deeply. But systems have trained them to refer out instead of adjust in. That phrase became one of the biggest conceptual breakthroughs of research. Refer out, adjust in. Current systems teach people if someone is struggling, send them somewhere else. But universal design, neuro-affirming practice, and micro-accommodations in general ask a radically different question. What can we change right here, right now, in this moment, in this environment. And the wild part is that many of the solutions are incredibly small, incredibly simple. Additional processing time, a pause, flexible participation, clearer instructions, reduced sensory overload, multiple ways to communicate, predictable structure, clarified expectations, pacing adjustments, tiny changes, but tiny changes with massive human consequences. Because the research ultimately points towards something deeply hopeful. Human beings are not broken because they struggle in poorly designed environments. Sometimes the environment itself is the barrier. And what changes everything when we think that way? Because the question stops being, what is wrong with the person? And it becomes, what happens if we design systems with actual human variation in mind from the very beginning? And that's not just an education question. It's a civilization question. And these civilization questions matter so much. Because beneath every classroom policy, every workplace rule, every social norm, every institutional habit, every design choice is a hidden question. What kind of world are we building? And I think one of the greatest problems of modern life is that we often rush towards answers before we have honestly asked the questions. We inherit ideas of success, productivity, intelligence, normalcy, professionalism, behavior, discipline, independence, and worth before we ever stop to ask whether we actually believe in the world those ideas are creating. Think about it. How do you define success? How do you define independence? We say we want inclusion, but we build systems around exclusion. We say we value mental health, but we reward burnout. We say we care about education, but we punish curiosity. We say we believe in human dignity, but design environments where people have to prove they deserve patience, access, rest, support, or even belonging. And sometimes the world we defend is not even the world we actually want. It's just the world we inherited, the world we were trained to accept, the world we were told was realistic, the world we were told was just how things are. But Humanities asks us to pause before we accept that. It asks us, is this the world we want to live in? Is this the world we want to pass on? Is this the world that reflects our deepest values? Or is this simply the world we have learned to survive in? That distinction matters because survival is not the same thing as belief. Just because we have learned how to function in a system does not mean that system is good. Just because we've adapted to a harmful environment does not mean that environment is healthy. Just because we know how to get through the day does not mean that the day has been designed with human flourishing in mind. And that, to me, is the real punch of this episode. Our job is not simply to succeed inside the world as it already exists. Our job is to live in a way that helps create the world we actually want. Not the world we perform belief in. Not the world we tolerate because we're tired. Not the world we defend because change feels overwhelming. Not the world we inherited without consent. The world we actually want. A world where people are not treated as problems because systems were designed poorly. A world where difference is not automatically punished. A world where asking for help is not treated as weakness or a flaw. A world where access is not an afterthought. A world where education helps people become more human, not more exhausted. A world where care is not just a feeling, but a practice. And that kind of world does not appear all at once overnight. It's built through choices, small ones, daily ones, often quiet, unnoticed ones. How we respond when someone struggles, how we design a classroom, how we run a meeting, how we write instructions, how we make room for processing time, how we listen before judging, how we choose curiosity over control, how we decide that dignity is not something people earn by performing correctly. That's where education becomes more than information. It becomes formation. It shapes the kind of people we become. And through us, it shapes the kind of world other people get to inhabit. So when we talk about micro-accommodations, universal design, disability, neurodiversity, inclusion, we're not just talking about classroom strategies. We're talking about civilization. We're talking about whether we have the courage to build systems that match what we say we believe. And maybe the question for all of us is not simply, what do I believe? Maybe the deeper question is, what kind of world do my choices make more possible? Because that's where real education lives. Not in what we memorize, but in what remains. In what changes us, in what we carry forward. And in the world we help create for everyone who comes after us. And honestly, Nacho Nuts, that is why I keep doing this work. That's why this podcast exists. That's why the Humanities 101 Foundation exists. It's why I continue and we collectively continue building conversations around neurodiversity, accessibility, universal design, curiosity, compassion, and human-centered systems. Because ideas matter. Conversations matter. And communities matter. Especially now. In a world that often feels increasingly disconnected, performative, polarized, and exhausting. Spaces where people can genuinely reflect, learn, question, and grow together matter more than ever. So if this resonated with you, if this episode resonated with you, I want to invite you to become part of this larger growing community. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, follow the podcast, share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment, engage with the conversation, because one of the most powerful things about this community is realizing that none of us are asking these questions alone. Every single week, people from different backgrounds, professions, identities, ages, and life experiences gather here to wrestle with what it means to build a more humane and human world. Teachers, students, parents, neurodivergent adults, disability advocates, researchers, healthcare workers, all just people trying to recover from burnout, people trying to rediscover curiosity, people trying to reconnect with themselves after years of surviving systems that never fully fit in. And honestly, seeing those conversations unfold every week gives me hope, gives me inspiration. So this week, I'd love to hear from all of you. Where are you tuning in from? How far is our reach right now? What part of the world are we listening from? I bet there's a lot of Michiganders, but I know that there are people from far, far away. What ideas from today's episode connected with you deeply? Let us know down in the comments in the chat. And if you'd like to support the broader work we're doing through the Humanities 101 Foundation outside of the class, This includes neuro-affirming education, accessibility, advocacy, outreach, public scholarship, community building initiatives. You can learn more at humanities101.org. Every share, every comment, every conversation, every classroom discussion, every act of curiosity, and every moment of human-centered thinking helps this work continue reaching more people. Because this has never been about a podcast, about a YouTube channel. It's always been about building a more thoughtful, compassionate, accessible, and human future together. And I genuinely believe that the future becomes more possible every time people choose curiosity over cynicism, understanding over assumption, and humanity over mere performance. So before we wrap up this week's episode, I also wanted to share something really exciting that's happening this summer through Humanities 101 Foundation that affects listeners of all ilks and types. This summer, thanks to an incredibly generous donation from one of our supporters, we're going to be giving away concert tickets all season long to some of the hottest shows of 2026 at Pine Knob Music Theater. And honestly, the lineup is kind of wild. So we're talking about artists and shows like Luke Bryant, Evanescence, Tim McGraw, Stained, you got Brooks and Dunn, Pitbull, 5 Seconds to Summer. Heck, even Kids Bop Live for families and younger fans. We're going to be giving away 2 tickets to select shows throughout the summer as a fun way to grow this community, expand our reach, and bring more people into these conversations around humanity, inclusion, curiosity, and accessibility. So here's what we're asking from all of you. Help us grow. Like the post, comment on the video, share the content, subscribe to the channel, engage with conversations, because every time you share an episode or interact with this channel, you help this work reach somebody who may really need it. And honestly, if you're already subscribed to the YouTube channel, you're already most of the way there. The giveaway process is going to be very simple and accessible. We want this to feel fun, easy, and community-centered rather than complicated. We'll be announcing these additional details, the official rules, featured concerts, and ways to win very soon. So definitely stay tuned over the next couple of weeks. And in the meantime, go check out the full summer concert lineup online because there are going to be some incredible shows coming at Pine Knob. Honestly, Nacho Knots, this community keeps growing in the coolest ways possible. And I'm really excited to see where this summer takes us together. And before we close out the whole episode, I want to pause just for a moment and really think about everything we covered today. Because we started with Einstein, reminding us that real education is not simply memorizing information. It's what remains after the facts fade. It's curiosity. It's perspective. It's empathy, critical thinking, the ability to ask deeper questions about ourselves and the world around us. From there, we talked about what this class, this podcast, and this community are really about. Not compliance, not endless box checking, not performative productivity, but genuine learning, genuine community. The kind of learning that changes how we see people, changes how we design systems, changes how we define success, changes even how we understand ourselves. But ultimately, changes how we understand ourselves moving through the world. We explored the idea that humanities is ultimately about learning about our relationship with society and asking those difficult questions, about recognizing that systems we inherit are not automatically the systems that we should preserve and perpetuate. Then we moved into research. And honestly, I think that research tells a powerful story about where society is right now. We discovered that most faculty genuinely care about neurodivergent students. Empathy was high. Punitive responses were low, but we also uncovered the clinical support gap. That space where people care emotionally, but environments remain structurally unchanged. And maybe that idea extends far beyond education. Maybe it explains workplaces, healthcare, politics, families, communities, even our culture itself. Because awareness alone is not transformation. Good intentions alone are not accessibility, and caring alone does not automatically create belonging. Then we ask the larger question underneath all of this. What kind of world are we actually building? Not the world we pretend to believe in, not the world we inherit, not the world we tolerate because we're exhausted, but the world we genuinely want to live in. A world built around human flourishing instead of mere survival. A world where systems adapt to people instead of forcing people to endlessly adapt to systems. A world where curiosity survives, where dignity matters, where access matters, where humanity matters. And ultimately, I think that is what this entire episode has been about. The understanding that education, research, universal design, micro-accommodations, and even everyday acts of kindness are all connected by one central question. How do we create a more human world? Not a perfect world, not an easy world, but a more thoughtful, compassionate, accessible, curious, and fully human one. And honestly, Nacho Knots, I think the fact that you are here asking these questions means we're already moving in that direction together. So before we go, I want to leave you with a few affirmations to carry with you into this week. And honestly, into a full summer of curiosity, reflection, growth, and becoming. So wherever you are right now, driving, walking, working, resting, studying, recovering, rebuilding, or simply trying to breathe your way through a complicated season of life, these are for you. I'm allowed to ask questions without immediately needing all the answers. And you are allowed to ask questions without immediately needing all the answers. Because genuine learning begins the moment we become curious enough to admit that growth is still possible. I do not need to earn my humanity through exhaustion, and neither do you. You do not need to earn your humanity through exhaustion. Because burnout is not proof of worth, and rest does not make a person less valuable. I am learning that curiosity is more valuable than perfection. You are also learning that curiosity is more valuable than perfection, because perfection often shuts conversations down, while curiosity keeps us open to discovery, empathy, and change. I can grow without becoming someone else, and you can grow without becoming someone else too. Because healthy growth should help us become more fully ourselves, not force us into performances that disconnect us from who we really are. I'm allowed to rethink systems, expectations, and beliefs that no longer reflect the world I want to help create, and you are allowed to rethink systems, expectations, and beliefs that are no longer reflective of the world that you want to create. Because inherited systems are not automatically healthy ones. And questioning the world around us is often the beginning of meaningful and lasting change. I can choose understanding over assumption, and so can you. Because many people are carrying invisible experiences, struggles, and stories that cannot be understood at first glance. I am capable of building small moments of accessibility, dignity, patience, and belonging into spaces around me. You are capable of building small moments of accessibility, dignity, patience, and belonging into the spaces around you. Because tiny human-centered actions can completely change how another person experiences the world. I do not have to change the whole world overnight to make it meaningful. You do not have to change the whole world overnight to make it a meaningful difference. Civilizations are often shaped through small daily choices repeated consistently over time, not overnight broad change. I am becoming more thoughtful, more reflective, and more human every time I choose curiosity over cynicism. You are becoming more thoughtful, more reflective, and more human every time you choose curiosity over cynicism as well. Because curiosity keeps the heart open in a world that often encourages people to emotionally shut down. You are allowed to grow at a sustainable pace, and I am allowed to grow at a sustainable pace. Because growth rooted in balance is far more lasting than growth fueled only by pressure and exhaustion. You are part of a larger community of people trying to build a more compassionate and accessible world, and so am I. So am I. Because none of us are asking these questions alone. And community reminds us that humanity is something that we build together. And perhaps most importantly, you are allowed to imagine a better world while still living imperfectly inside this current one. And I am allowed to imagine a better world while still living imperfectly inside this current one. Because hope is not pretending everything is fine. Hope is continuing to build, care, question, and imagine anyway. And remember, as we learned last week, revolutions are built on hope. So thank you for spending time with me this week, Nacho Knots. Thank you for your curiosity. Thank you for your openness. Thank you for your willingness to wrestle with difficult questions instead of running away from them. So take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and as always, keep learning, keep questioning, keep growing, and keep making the world a little more human everywhere you go. We'll go ahead and close out this week's episode. So again, thank you for spending part of your day, your mind, and your curiosity with me. As we move into the summer together, I hope you continue asking questions. I hope you continue noticing the world around you. I hope you continue building spaces of dignity, accessibility, patience, and curiosity, belonging wherever you go. Because the world changes when human beings decide to become more thoughtful about each other. And remember, behavior is communication. Difference is not deficit. Small accommodations can change lives, and curiosity may be one of the most human things that we have left. This has been the Neuro-Affirming Conversation Hour for Outreach and Support, lovingly called NACHOS. I'm Dr. Dutch Hazlett, and until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, stay human, and keep reaching for predictability, balance, and joy. See you next week, Nacho Knots.
Thank you for joining us. See you next week. The views and opinions expressed in this video are solely those of the creator and do not reflect the views of any institution, employer, or affiliated organization.